Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of NannyCast. If you're listening to us, you're missing out on the show notes and more, which can be found on our website at nannycast.com. We love it when you promote us by giving us a great rating on Stitcher, blogging about us, or tweeting about us. If you want to go one step further, head on over to our website at nannycast.com and click Support Us. Hello, and welcome to another fun and exciting episode of
NannyCast.
I'm Nanny Jen.
I'm Nanny Laura.
And we are
the Nannies.
Today's episode is on the topic of
Nanny Burnout,
which I'm under the impression that you are suffering from, right, Nanny Laura?
Oh, most definitely. Where does nanny burnout come from?
Nanny burnout is a type of burnout that is unique to the nanny industry because it combines all of the worst aspects of mommy or daddy burnout, which are different from one another biochemically, but that's a topic for a parenting podcast, not us, with all the worst aspects of employee burnout. Nanny burnout is a collection of symptoms that stem from chronic stress that a nanny experiences throughout their career. Of course, you'll experience stressors in your nanny career. Of course you will. Acute stressors. It's the chronicness of this career stress that's the problem. And if left untreated, you will have a breakdown. Let's quickly clarify some terms. Acute stress is stress that has a beginning, a middle, and most importantly, an end. It stops. It's temporary, even if it might feel a little long. And when it's especially high intensity, we happen to call it distress. Chronic stress has a beginning, and I suppose there might be a middle, except there is no end. Chronic stress has no end. It's permanent. Moves into your life like a friend who says they only need to crash on your couch for a few nights while they get their life together, and then it never leaves. It may be low intensity, but it lingers and stays and won't leave, and you never get a break from it, and thanks to that, it accumulates over time, and oh my God, Sandra, go home. Now, let's see if any of us even have nanny burnout, or if we're just having a it'll end at some point period of distress. Okay, quiz time. Please, in your mind, keep account of which of the following statements you agree with as describing your current state of mind or body. You don't have to remember which ones, just the number of, oh yeah, that's me. Starting now.
I'm jealous of my bosses because they get to spend their days talking to other adults.
I question whether switching careers away from nannying will make me feel like a normal person again.
I eat a lot of junk food.
Not enough.
I'm too busy at work to eat a real meal, and I'm too tired after work to eat a real meal, so I just snack a lot, even if it is healthy snacks.
I look forward to my decompression alcohol, or, alcohol is the only one legal in the state where this podcast is based, so let's just say alcohol. So, I look forward to my decompression alcohol at the end of the workday. Just a bit too much. But I know I'm not an addict.
Very much so.
Every day, something on my body hurts. Even if it isn't always the same thing each day.
I prefer texting instead of phone calls because I don't have the energy for a conversation.
I have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep.
It takes me longer to do a task because I have to drag myself through it due to my low energy.
I criticize my own childcare decisions and choices that I make throughout the day.
Yes.
Outside of work, I get in trouble for treating other adults as if they are my charges.
I feel like I have a weird version of baby brain, yet it is not connected with pregnancy's biological explanation.
I snap at the kids, often.
I overbook myself and the kids, or double schedule myself and the kids for play dates.
I'm always rushing at work, yet somehow I'm always late.
I feel like I'm getting dumber each week because I don't feel like I'm using my brain.
Just when I feel like I've got the rhythm going with the children, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, or the caring adults come into our lives and mess things up.
All the time.
Okay, that's the quiz. If you answered yes to 4 or more of these statements, you have nanny burnout.
I was in full-blown nanny burnout last week, and I've started to adjust myself to help ease that situation. So how do we help nannies overcome nanny burnout?
We have a 10-step plan to kick this chronic stress to the curb. The first step is you need to identify your stress style. Once you know your stress style, you'll be able to find the early signs that you're stressed and better ways to alleviate the stress than what you've been doing. What you've been doing isn't working if you're nanny burned out, so it's time to substitute better. We will have a quiz in the show notes to help you figure out your stress style if you don't already know. Here are the 3 stress styles. They are fight, flight.
I am a flight.
And freeze. Fight means you become aggressive and will interpret things as antagonistic. You'll pick fights with a toddler and believe your bosses are trying to expose you. On a personal note, this is me all over. Nanny Jen, I'm a fighter. Flight means you'll look for an escape route.
My flight makes me want to start looking for a new job as soon as the trouble starts, which is not good.
Maybe you fire up a job search engine and see what other employment opportunities are out there, but the problem seems to follow you from job to job. Maybe you run to the bathroom and hide behind that door for some space. Maybe you voluntarily zone out if you cannot physically flee. Freeze means that you become so overwhelmed that you are immobile. Nothing about your body works, even when you want it to. This may appear to the outsiders to look like you're zoning out, but you're doing it involuntarily, and that is the difference.
So why are we having these stress responses?
Stress isn't always a bad thing. It can be handy for a burst of extra energy and focus, like when you're playing a competitive sport or have to speak in public. But when it's continuous, the kind most of us face day in and day out, it actually begins to change your brain. Chronic stress can affect brain size, its structure, and how it functions. Stress begins with something called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, a series of interactions between endocrine glands in the brain and on the kidney, which controls your body's reaction to stress. When your brain detects a stressful situation, your HPA axis is instantly activated and releases a hormone called cortisol, which primes your body for instant action. But high levels of cortisol over long periods of time wreak havoc on your brain. For example, chronic stress increases the activity level and number of neural connections in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. And as levels of cortisol rise, electric signals in your hippocampus, the part of the brain associated with learning, memories, and stress control, deteriorate. The hippocampus also inhibits the activity of the HPA axis, so when it weakens, so does your ability to control your stress. That's not all, though. Cortisol can literally cause your brain to shrink in size. Too much of it results in the loss of synaptic connections between neurons and the shrinking of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that regulates behaviors like concentration, decision-making, judgment, and social interaction. It also leads to fewer new brain cells being made in the hippocampus. This means chronic stress might make it harder for you to learn and remember things.
How do you fix it?
So let's talk better. If you're a fighter, take that aggression and combativeness and use it to fuel betterness in the world. When you have the urge to burn something to the ground, take the charges with you and volunteer in a way that burns obstacles for the less fortunate. Since this is my stress style, I prefer to volunteer in a literacy program that ensures that children of all income levels have access to books. If your stress style is flight, include your charges. Instead of zoning out all by your lonesome, tell your smart speaker to play a guided meditation podcast, and we'll link to one in the show notes, and meditate with your charges nearby. Now you're having a teachable moment of zoning out. Or if you need to physically flee, strap the kids into the stroller and go for a walk.
Getting outside is very important for the children and the adults.
But we'll explain exactly how later in the show. If you freeze, well, there isn't much you can do otherwise physically, because it's involuntary.
Mm-hmm.
But you can be kind to yourself, as this stress response isn't your fault. If anything, it's the fault of your parents for giving you the genes that make your body do this when stressed. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But what is best to do if you are a freezer is to... Step 2. Work hard to reduce your stressors so that you don't have to have a stress response. How much did you love my ability to make that transition right there? Yay! Don't get your hopes up, NannyCast listeners. You'll likely never get as good a transition as that ever again. Okay, for step 2, you want to be proactive to prevent stress before it starts. So that means you need to figure out the pain points in your life that lead you to feeling stress. Then, once you've figured out the pain points that lead to the stress, the pain points, not the stress that results, the pain points need to be accepted as inevitable, like gravity is inevitable. So, to make it an analogy, if you throw a rock up in the air, That would be your pain point, the throwing the rock up in the air. It must come down, which would be the inevitability. But it doesn't have to come down on your foot and cause you pain, which would be your stress. You can always move your foot so the rock hits the ground and not your tender flesh. So too with pain points and stress. You just have to plan your life in a way so that you outsmart the pain points when they show up so that they don't cause you stress. For example, for some people, a messy workplace is a pain point that causes stress.
I need to start my day in a clean work atmosphere.
It is a valid ask to request that your employers do the work of maintaining your workplace's clutter. Or it is valid to seek a new workplace, which is kept by the family to a pain point-free level of tidiness. In the publication known as Psychology Today, they've got your back with an article entitled Why Mess Causes Stress, which we will link in the episode's show notes over at nannycast.com. It might help you to present this when asking your employers or requesting that your employers keep their home a little tidier.
And it's very important for nannies to remember that our employers know that we are human and it's okay to be human because they did not hire Mary Poppins. They hired you.
Step 3 is to compartmentalize your life by creating unbreakable and unpushable boundaries so that you don't take your work home with you.
That's a very important one.
The way I sustainably do this is that when I walk out of the door of my workhouse on the way to my car to ride home, I take a few deep, cleansing breaths and mentally pack away Nanny Jen into a brain shoebox and unpack Funtime Jen, who is a socialite and a lazy instant pot cookist. I don't even think about my charges or talk about them when I'm off the clock, as a matter of self-care. Step 4 is to manage your time and plan proactively. This is a big one for me personally. I've had to absolutely add 30 minutes to the start time of everything on my plan, which turns out is the recommended amount of time to add in order to realistically and proactively plan. The other part of this is to say no to plans that encroach on your 30-minute buffers. There is always someone else to do the favor or another day to get together.
This has become very important to me recently.
I'm still struggling with learning this one, but I can say that it absolutely has had positive effects.
Once you take the pressure off of yourself, so much eases up.
Step 5 is to get some perspective. Optimism, which is finding the aspects of good in any situation, is linked with something called the parasympathetic nervous system. But wait, what is the parasympathetic nervous system and what do we want to do with it?
Today on Crash Course Anatomy and Physiology, parasympathetic nervous system. It's often described as the calming side of your autonomic system, a kind of antidote to the effects of stress created by the sympathetic system. So you've had a really stressful day, so your sympathetic system is charged up. You come home, crash on the couch, mow down a half a pizza. Your stomach sends signals to your brain. Your brain sees that your stomach is churning away, which is a usual parasympathetic activity. So it sends signals back down, triggering other parasympathetic responses, like slowing down your heart rate, putting some glucose back into storage, and reducing all that norepinephrine that your sympathetic system was pumping out all day. Soon, you start feeling more relaxed, which is just one reason why, for some people, eating is a way of reducing stress and anxiety.
Poor gentleman junkies.
That brings us to the 6th step, which happens to be the second part of the Serenity Prayer.
Welcome to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast.
I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the Serenity Prayer. This is something that most people have heard of. It was written originally by Reinhold Niebuhr, and it is a longer prayer that he wrote, but we are only reminded of these very first lines. So let me just read it to you. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And now for today's quote. You can't calm the storm, so stop trying. What you can do is calm yourself. The storm will pass. And that's from Timber Hawkeye.
Did you happen to realize that the first part of the Serenity Prayer was also a step for how to undo nanny burnout? The 6th step is the courage to change the things that you can. For example, since eating activates your parasympathetic nervous system, you may be a junk food eater. But could you reach for a carrot instead of a Twinkie?
That's a whole nother show, whole other podcast on that one for me.
Step 7 is to get outside. Plants and soil organisms put off chemical signalers which, when inhaled by a person, also activate their, guess what, parasympathetic nervous system. Isn't nature thoughtful? Since you are the adult and you're the one in charge, try to get 5 to 10 minutes of outside time per day to keep that parasympathetic nervous system working for you and against the chronic stress of nanny burnout. Step 8 is one of the things Nanny Sarah keeps championing, which you can hear in episode 27 of NannyCast. Have a healthy dose of lazy.
Yes, that is true. That is something that I need to be taught.
Well, what does that mean? First of all, it has to be a healthy dose. So you cannot completely disengage and voluntarily zone out. You do need to still be aware of what the children are up to, but you don't need to put your body into their personal space all the time. Don't overtend the children. Putting your physical body into their personal space just perpetuates the stress cycle that keeps the chronic stress of nanny burnout rolling. Don't believe me? Check out the 2008 Monitor on Psychology for the American Psychological Association, which is linked in the show notes on the nannycast.com website, and read it from the experts.
Well, I understand now why my nanny family just follows the child around the house.
A healthy dose of lazy means that you need to physically and mentally step back and let the children ask for assistance from you, and let the children try to problem solve before you step in. It also means that if you are always feeling like you are rushing around putting out fires, stop doing that. The worst that can happen is that one of those metaphorical fires burns all the way down, and now there's one fewer thing left that you have to spend time fighting to save.
Yes, very true. Very true of someone like me who has OCD and perfection issues and expects everything to run smoothly even when introducing a newborn baby.
It means that if it's a big hassle to put away all the toys every afternoon around quitting time, and those same toys are always pulled back out first thing in the morning when you arrive at work, don't. Don't put them away. There's no point unless there is a mandate from management. Step 9 is to connect physically and in person with other nannies. You don't need to be besties. You don't need to be able to play nicely together outside of work. You don't need to like them or their values, but the fact that they are other nannies means that they understand the foibles and fun picadillos of this profession. And when you see them in person, be vulnerable and tell them about your imperfect feelings. Your sharing will lead to them sharing. And not just out loud, but sharing in a way that generates oxytocin within your body as well. And oxytocin is a hormonal balm for your stress.
Well, coming to my community and my nanny friends actually helped me with my nanny burnout.
Oh, and then there's this really cool term to be aware of. It's called a vulnerability hangover.
Over my dead body comes from Wondery.
The words kind of just flew out of me, but then when I was done, I sat there and I couldn't look anyone in the eye, and I was sweaty, and I just thought, okay, now I've done it. Now it's out there. Now what?
So vulnerability hangover is the feeling of shame or regret that comes after sharing something personal with another person. And sometimes it even includes the urge to avoid the other person once you've told them something really personal, even if they took it really well. Just when you feel a vulnerability hangover, go, hey, that's a vulnerability hangover. I know what you are. I know you're a lie, and I'm going to keep hanging out with that person and sharing because you're lying to me that I shouldn't have. Vulnerability hangover, down with you. And finally, the last step. It's a great practical one that turns off combativeness and contention in children, and is called child-directed play. We talked about child-directed play in episode 23 of NannyCast, so head over to our website at nannycast.com and look for that episode under our menu item for episodes. And give it a listen, as our feed only shows our latest 20 episodes, so it may no longer be visible on your favorite podcast app. The quick and dirty is that each child should be given 5 minutes where they are allowed to be the ones who are bossy and in charge about how everyone is going to play. Giving them just that small amount of control will make them more cooperative, which will reduce combativeness as a stress pain point.
That is very true. Letting them make the decision helps.
And as a final note, now that we're done with all 10 steps, I know that online nanny support groups seem to be a very tempting place to be vulnerable and share experiences, but it won't help you with nanny burnout. Well, why not? Because online venting cannot trigger the oxytocin release, whereas in-person vulnerability can. But that doesn't mean that online nanny support groups cannot be useful. You can use them to find a local in-person community of fellow nannies to work step 9 with. Or, if you tend to shy away from Facebook, the International Nanny Association at nanny.org has a list of local specific nanny support groups which, when you email them asking, can point you to local nannies to meet for a drink or event session. We've linked to the INA list from the show notes over at nannycast.com.
I think that finding your network of nannies to turn into a community is very helpful during any stage in a nanny's career, but especially during nanny burnout. And vocalizing and being told that your feelings are true and heard helps. And also having other nannies to come up with solutions to your burnout is very important, because when you are burnt out, you are not thinking clearly, and then you cannot come up with solutions to your own problems.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this episode of NannyCast. Join us next time for more human resources topics, specifically for nannies.